In alhamdulillah wa salat wa salam ala wa rasulallah. We're continuing with the hadiths from Sahih Muslim. We're going to move to the next chapter. And this chapter of Sahih Muslim addresses what to do in the event of a crime committed against a person, such as murder. Um, we're going to speak about the blood money. We're going to speak about Qisas. And what is Qisas? Qisas is an Arabic term that refers to an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. This is part of the judicial system in Islam. You do something to someone as part of the punishment, the same thing is done back to you. That's what Qisas refers to. Okay, and this is in the case of a crime committed against you. For example, somebody kills someone in your family. Someone takes the life of another person for no just cause. Islam allows you the right of qisas. We have a hadith here, whereas during the battle of, this is during the time of the Muslims were fighting against the Jews of Khaybar, they went into a peace agreement. The Arabs went into a peace agreement with the Jews. Okay, they had a peace treaty. And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has sent some companions to establish a peace agreement with the Jews of Khaybar. And after they had agreed to this treaty and left, one of the Arabic Muslim men was killed. And his dead body was found and thrown into a well. When the other companions found the dead man's body, they buried him and they went back to Medina, and they told the Prophet that they had, even though they had entered into this peace treaty with the Jews still ended up killing one of them and tried to hide it by throwing the body in the well. So the Prophet asked them, did you see them murder him? Did you see them kill him? He said, I want you and all the men that were with you to give me 50 oaths, saying that all 50 of you, that any of you saw the Jews kill this man. He said, if you can bring back those oaths, then you are entitled to the blood money. And they said, oh Prophet, we didn't see it happen. None of us saw this murder. None of us saw this happen. We weren't there to see it. So the Prophet said, then how can you accuse them of killing him when you didn't see it? He could have fallen into the well, or a nomad could have killed him to try to rob him and threw him in a well. You don't know what happened. He said, because if I ask the Jews if they did it, they're going to give me oaths saying that they didn't do it. So then they said, but the Prophet, you mean to tell me that you will believe the word of these non-Muslims over us? The Prophet said, no, the point I'm trying to make to you is I cannot I cannot command the Jews to pay the blood money for something that you cannot prove that they did, when they're going to deny it. Whether they're Muslim or not, you have to have proof. You have to bring the proof that these people killed him. And since you cannot, I cannot make them pay you blood money. But instead, what the Prophet did was, to show how great a man he was, he gave them the blood money. He gave them the blood money for the slain brother of that companion. But as the point here is, he was trying to make them see, I cannot make people pay for something that you can't prove they did. Because if I ask them, they're going to deny it. So to keep the peace, what the prophet did was he paid the blood money for them. Okay? But the point here is that when someone takes the life of another person, you can't just accuse someone of doing it unless there's proof that that person did it. If you can prove that the person did it, then that person's family who committed the murder would have to pay the blood money. But you have to be able to prove it. And if you can't prove it, you have to swear by a law that you saw it happen. And if you can't do that, then you're not entitled. We can't make the people from that family pay that money. That's the point. Everybody understand that. And that's what you remember for the quiz. In order to receive the blood money for murder, you have to have either seen the murder with your own eyes, and you swear by a law to such, bring witnesses who have seen it, who will swear by a law to such, or you're not entitled to the blood money. That's the point. And let's look at the next hadith. The next hadith addresses how 8 men came to the prophet and converted to Islam. But when they came to Medina, they got sick with the flu because the weather in Medina is so much different than the weather in Mecca or anywhere else in Arabia. So these 8 men came, converted to Islam, and then they got sick with the flu. And so the prophet told them, well, if you want to be cured of this virus, go to the camels that belong to so-and-so and ask him to let you drink from their milk and their urine, because the drinking their milk and their urine will cure you of this infectious disease you had, which was like a flu. So they said, okay. They went out. They went to the shepherd. They drank his camel's milk and urine. Then afterwards, they end up killing the man. They killed him and they drove away his camels. When the prophet heard about this, he said, oh my goodness, they claim to be Muslim. It was a trick. They confessed to be Muslim and took Shahada, but it wasn't their intention to stay Muslim. The prophet ordered the people to go find them. And so his men went out and tracked them down. And when they were caught, they were executed. Their hands and their feet were cut off and their eyes were cut out. And that's the penalty for what they've done. That's the punishment in Islam for apostasy. And that's also the punishment in Islam for terrorism, for being a terrorist. I want you guys to understand Islam abhors terrorism. We are not terrorists. To kill people like that, to kill someone like that. When they took that man's camel's milk and stuff, they killed that man. They cut the man's eyes out. They persecuted him. They tortured that man. They cut out his eyes. And this is why the prophet ordered that their eyes be cut out. Because this is Qisas. In Islam, we believe in an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. You cut that old shepherd's man's eyes out. So we're going to have your eyes cut out too. So that's why their eyes were cut out. Their hands and feet were cut off because that's the punishment for treachery. That's the punishment for terrorism in Islam. Okay, so again, guys, Islam believes and teaches an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. You have a lot of Muslims out there who say that they wish that they lived in an Islamic state. No, you don't want an Islamic state, because an Islamic state is a state that carries out Islamic law, Sharia law. You hear Muslims say that they want Sharia law. You couldn't live with Sharia law because many of you would be executed as terrorists, especially those of you who act like terrorists and hang with terrorists. Your hands and your feet would be cut off, and you'll be left in the sun to die a long, slow, treacherous death. That's the punishment for terrorism. That's also the punishment in Islam for apostasy, too, for embracing Islam and then apostating afterwards. The punishment for apostasy is death, guys. But that's only if you live in an Islamic country. You live in America. You can't do that stuff here. You can't go around piercing people's eyes out and cutting off their hands and feet and stuff. You're not in an Islamic country. You're in a non-Muslim country, and you have to respect the laws here. Islam teaches us to respect the laws of the land in which we live. You can't do that here. If you want Sharia law, move to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia will give you just what you ask for. And you probably won't live long, because you're probably a terrorist yourself. Okay? Other examples of how Islam believes in an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. We have another situation in where a Jewish man had killed a young girl. He wanted to rob her. So what he did was he took a rock and hit her in the head just so he could steal her silver jewelry from her. The people found her body lying in the street, so they brought her to the prophet, and he asked her, she was almost dying. He said, who did this to you? Who did this to you? And before she died, she nodded her head to the name that the prophet had mentioned. Afterwards, she died. So the prophet then had the man brought forward, and the man confessed. He confessed to having killed her. He said that he crushed her in the back of her head with a rock because he wanted her jewelry. So the Prophet ﷺ ordered the same be done to him. He ordered this man to be executed with a rock being crushed to his head, and that's how he was executed. Okay? So again, we talk about Sharia law. You talk about how you want to live in an Islamic state. Do you really want to live in an Islamic state? Because here in America, you have they don't kill you. It's not an eye for an eye. They put you in jail. You might do life, or you might get off for some technicality. That's not the case in Sharia. It's an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Okay? Also, Islam teaches that if two men or two women get into a fight with each other and someone gets hurt, or someone dies, the family doesn't have to demand an Qisas. Let's look at this example here. Two men got into a fight, and one of them bit the hand of the other person and took his tooth out. The man who lost his tooth went to the prophet and said, he made me lose my tooth. And the prophet asked him, what do you want me to do? You're asking for Qisas? You want me to let you put your hand in this man's hand in your mouth and let you bite it? Okay, so again, when there's two people fighting like this, you both were at fault. You both were fighting. You lost your tooth as a result, then that's your problem. Okay? The only thing that we can do is allow you to let him put his hand in your mouth. That's it. But there's no Qisas here, guys. Okay, because both of you were fighting. This is the consequences that you both reaped. There is no Qisas here. And the same with this situation here. We have to understand, guys, it is only permissible in Islam to take the life of another Muslim in 3 instances. The only time Islamic law allows for the life of another person is in the case of adultery. If a man or a woman is convicted and proven to be guilty of adultery, Islam in that case demands death. Also, the other case in which death is awarded is in the case of murder. If you kill somebody, you commit murder, intentional murder. If you intentionally take the life of another person, the punishment in Islam is your life. There ain't no life sentence. There is no life in jail. You are executed. And the third instance in which the person's life is taken, is in the case of apostasy. So I want you guys to remember that those are the only three crimes that bring about the death penalty in Islam: murder, adultery, and apostasy. Those are the only three instances in which the death sentence is given in Islam. Okay? Also, guys, the first murder was committed by Adam's son, the firstborn son of Adam. He was the first human being to commit murder. He killed his own brother. As a result of that, he will receive part of the sin of everyone who's committed murder since then. So in the day of judgment, he's going to be held accountable or get a part of the sin for every other human being who committed murder. Because whoever starts a bad practice, they receive part of the punishment for those who follow him in that. Just like whoever starts a good practice receives a reward of those who follow him in that. So that's just a little bit of history. This is why I love the hadiths, because the prophet always throws a little bit of history in there to us. He let us know that the first murder was committed by the son of Adam when he killed his own brother. And he will get part of the punishment for every murderer after him. Okay? Just food for thought there. Also, the prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught us that the first people who Allah will judge on the day of judgment are the people who were guilty of murder. The murderers will be the first people to stand before Allah to be judged on the day of judgment. Also, when the prophet gave his farewell speech, he told us that this is when he also told us that your blood, your property, and your honor are sacred. Anyone who professes to believe La ilaha illallah, that makes them Muslim. And their blood, their property, and their honor is off limits to another Muslim. That means you cannot take that person's life. You cannot steal that person's property. You cannot slander his character. The prophet told us all of that during his farewell speech. But the first people to be issued judgment will be the people who committed murder in this world. Also, Islam teaches us that if a person confesses to murder, then we accept his testimony. And also, Islam teaches us that when two men fight each other and one of them kills the other, both of them will be in the hellfire. Why? Because it was the intention of both to kill each other. We're not supposed to fight another Muslim. We're not supposed to harm another Muslim with our tongue and our hands. If you get into a fight with another Muslim and you kill him, you can't sit there and say, oh, it was an accident. You shouldn't have been fighting with him. That's your life. His family can demand Qisas. His family can demand an eye for an eye, a life for a life. Okay? Or his family can choose to exonerate you. And that's what this hadith here is speaking about. Two men got into a fight with each other. One man killed the other. and his family came and wanted Qisas. They wanted a blood money on behalf, or a life. The man who killed their relative's life. The prophet told them it would be better if you guys forgive this man rather than collect blood money, or rather than collect his life. He said, because both of them were fighting each other. He said, if your relative had lived, your relative would have killed him. The intentions of both of them were to kill each other. They were both in the wrong for fighting. Both of them would be in the hellfire because they both had the intention to kill each other. It's just that this guy succeeded. So the family ended up forgiving that man, letting him go after the prophet convinced him of this. But the bottom line, whenever two Muslims fight, both of them will be in the hellfire because they both had the intention to harm the other. And finally for today, another example of Qisas. Two women who were co-wives. They were both married to the same man. They got into an argument. One of the women became angry and picked up a rock and threw it at the other woman and hit her in the stomach. And they didn't know that she was pregnant. She ended up having a miscarriage. She ended up having a miscarriage as a result. So some of the relatives of the woman who she hit said, should we make them give us compensation? The prophet ended up making that woman who hit the baby, who caused her to abort the baby, to pay the blood money. So even though the child was not born, the fact that the woman was pregnant and that rock hit her in the stomach and caused her to abort it, her family had to pay blood money for the loss of that child to that other woman. So that's what you learn here. Islam teaches in the case of a pregnant woman, if you hit a pregnant woman and she ends up miscarrying, you have to pay blood money to her for the life of that child that was lost, even though the child wasn't born. Okay? So that's the punishment in Islam for a pregnant woman. And the same thing, say you're married, your husband hit you, your husband causes you to have a miscarriage. Your husband has to pay you blood money for the loss of that child. This happened during the caliphate of Umar. A man beat his wife up and caused her to have a miscarriage. Umar ordered that man, he ordered the man to be beaten too, by the way, because Umar didn't believe in that, beating up a pregnant woman. Umar had that man beat as a result, and afterwards he told him, now you give your wife the blood money for that child that she lost. Okay? Keep your hands off your wives, guys. You do not beat up on women in Islam, and especially not a pregnant woman. Shame on you for doing that. Okay, so these were all hadiths addressing Qisas and blood money. Again, Qisas is an Arabic term that means an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. And this is done in the case of crimes committed against each other. You knock my eye out, I'm going to knock your eye out. And then we also, Islam has blood money in the cases of murder. You murder someone intentionally, you have to pay the blood money to his family, to his relatives. You beat a woman up who's pregnant and she miscarries, you have to pay the blood money to her and her family. Islam is all about justice. But again, this is for Islamic countries. If you live in a country that has Islamic Sharia established. The only country I know with Islamic Sharia is Saudi Arabia. We don't do this stuff in America. You commit a crime in America, you are turned over to the courts here, and you have to go by whatever the laws here are. We don't take the law into our own hands here in America or the United Kingdom or anywhere else in the world where you live. Okay? On that note, we'll stop right here for today. Tomorrow, I'll give you a brief little quiz to cover the main points of today's hadiths, and then we'll move on to the next chapter. If you have any questions or comments, put them on the screen. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta